The thunder of hooves split the quiet dawn as Owen Blackwood rode hard across the Montana plains, his face a mask of grim determination beneath his worn leather hat. The year was 1878, and he was a man who trusted nothing but the revolver at his hip and the horse beneath him. Behind him lay a trail of betrayal that had turned his heart to stone, while ahead stretched nothing but open country exactly how he preferred it. The small town of Redemption Creek appeared on the horizon, a collection of wooden structures rising from the prairie like a mirage. Owen had no intention of staying longer than it took to resupply before heading north to the untamed territories. 10 years as a ranch hand, cavalry scout, and occasional bounty hunter had taught him that roots were dangerous things that only gave others leverage to hurt you. He slowed his stallion to a trot as he approached the town's main street. Redemption Creek was like 100 other frontier settlements, a general store, saloon, small church, and scattered houses built by people foolish enough to believe they could carve a permanent life from this unforgiving land. "Whoa, Mercury," Owen said, patting the midnight black horse's neck as they stopped outside the general store. The morning sun cast long shadows as he dismounted, his boots raising small clouds of dust when they hit the ground. His tall frame moved with the easy grace of a man who spent more time in the saddle than on his feet. The store's bell jangled as he pushed open the door. The familiar smells of coffee, leather, and tobacco greeted him. He nodded curtly to the white-haired shopkeeper and began gathering supplies: ammunition, coffee, dried beef, and flour. Owen spoke only when necessary, his deep voice rough from disuse. As he placed his items on the counter, the door opened again, allowing a shaft of sunlight to momentarily blind him. When his vision cleared, a woman stood before him, her presence immediately commanding the room in a way that made Owen instinctively tense. She was dressed practically in a simple blue dress and riding boots, her honey blonde hair pulled back in a functional braid. But it was her eyes that caught his attention, clear and intelligent, the color of a summer sky, with a determination that seemed out of place in this dusty frontier town. "Mr. Henderson," she addressed the shopkeeper, ignoring Owen completely. "I've come about that parcel from St. Louis. Has it arrived?" "Just yesterday, Miss Olivia," the old man replied with a smile that Owen noted was considerably warmer than the one he'd received. "Been keeping it safe for you." Owen stepped aside, eager to conclude his business and be on his way. The woman Olivia glanced at him briefly, her gaze assessing in a way that made him uncomfortable. There was something about her that seemed both out of place and perfectly at home in this rough country. "You're new," she stated, not a question but a fact. "Just passing through," Owen replied, his tone making it clear that was all the conversation he intended to have. She nodded, accepting his brusqueness without offense. "Welcome to Redemption Creek nonetheless. I'm Olivia Hayes." "Owen Blackwood?" The name left his lips before he could consider why he was bothering to introduce himself to someone he'd never see again. Henderson placed a wooden crate on the counter. "Here's your medical supplies, Miss Olivia. Though I still say it's dangerous, you heading out to those homesteads alone." Owen's ears perked up despite himself. Medical supplies? The woman didn't look like a doctor. "The fever's spreading, Mr. Henderson. Those families can't make it into town, so someone has to go to them." She spoke with quiet authority that suggested she was accustomed to having her decisions questioned. "I'll need 2 more bottles of alcohol and whatever clean bandages you have." Owen paid for his supplies, intending to leave, but found himself lingering, watching as Olivia efficiently organized her purchases. "You a nurse?" he asked, surprising himself with the question. She looked up, a flash of something amusement perhaps crossing her features. "Not formally. My father was a doctor back east. I learned what I could from him." She paused, studying Owen's face. "You look like you've had that cut above your eye for a few days. It could use proper cleaning." Owen's hand instinctively went to the small gash on his forehead, the result of a low-hanging branch during a night ride. "It's nothing. Infection doesn't care if you think it's nothing," she replied, reaching into her bag for a small bottle and clean cloth before he could object. "Hold still." To his own amazement, Owen complied, standing motionless as she dabbed the stinging liquid on his wound. Her touch was gentle but clinical, without the hesitation most women showed around him. His imposing height and the scars visible on his hands and face usually kept people at a distance exactly as he preferred it. "There," she said, stepping back. "That should prevent it from festering." "Obliged," Owen murmured, touching the now clean cut. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. "Miss Olivia, you ain't planning to make those rounds alone today, are you? What with the Miller gang been spotted near Cottonwood Creek?" A shadow crossed her face. "The Miller gang or not, those children need medicine." Owen should have simply nodded goodbye and walked out the door. He should have mounted Mercury and ridden out of Redemption Creek without a backward glance. That was what experience had taught him: avoid entanglements, avoid complications, avoid trusting anyone. Instead, he heard himself say, "Where are these homesteads?" Olivia looked at him with surprise. "North and east, scattered along Cottonwood Creek, about half a day's ride to reach them all." "Dangerous country for a woman alone," Owen said, immediately regretting his words when her eyes narrowed. "I've been making these rounds for 2 years, Mr. Blackwood. I'm quite capable." "Never said you weren't, but even capable people can use an extra gun sometimes." He wasn't sure why he was offering, except that something about the thought of her riding alone into territory where the notorious Miller gang operated didn't sit right with him. Suspicion flickered across her face. "And why would you offer your gun to a stranger?" A fair question. One Owen didn't have a good answer for. "Heading north anyway," he said with a shrug. "Makes no difference to me which trail I take." She studied him for a long moment, as if trying to read his intentions. Owen kept his face impassive, a skill honed through years of poker games and standoffs. "I leave in 20 minutes, she finally said. "If you're serious, meet me at the livery stable." Owen nodded, watching as she gathered her supplies and left the store. He stood there a moment longer, wondering what had possessed him to make such an offer. Riding escort for a woman delivering medicine to isolated homesteads was exactly the kind of complication he avoided. "That's the first time I've seen Miss Olivia accept help from anyone," Henderson remarked, eyeing Owen with new interest. "She's been on her own since her father passed 2 years back, took over his work, looking after folks too far out to reach the town doctor." Owen grunted noncommittally as he gathered his purchases. "Folks around here respect her," Henderson continued, his tone carrying a subtle warning. "She's had a rough go of it, but never complains, never asks for anything either." "Just offering an escort," Owen said flatly, "nothing more to it." The old shopkeeper nodded slowly. "Well, them homesteaders will be grateful. The Miller gang's been hitting isolated places hard. 3 robberies in the last month, and they left 2 men dead at the Peterson place." Owen had heard of the Miller gang, 4 brothers who'd started as cattle rustlers before the war and had graduated to armed robbery and murder in the lawless years that followed. The kind of men who gave places like Redemption Creek their names. 20 minutes later, Owen led Mercury to the livery stable, still questioning his own judgment. He found Olivia already mounted on a sturdy chestnut mare, a pair of saddle bags bulging with supplies. She wore a wide-brimmed hat now, and a rifle was secured to her saddle. "You came," she said, sounding mildly surprised. "Said I would." Owen swung up onto Mercury's back, adjusting his own rifle in its scabbard. "We have 4 homesteads to visit," she explained, turning her horse toward the north road. "The Wilsons, the Johnsons, the Pratts, and the Hansons. All have children sick with the fever." Owen fell in beside her as they rode out of town. The morning air was crisp, the vast Montana sky stretching endlessly above them. For several miles they rode in silence, the rhythmic sound of hoofbeats the only conversation. "You're not much for talking, are you, Mr. Blackwood?" Olivia finally asked, glancing at him with those perceptive blue eyes. "Not much to say," Owen replied. "Where are you from, originally?" "Pennsylvania." He offered nothing more. "That's a long way from Montana territory." Owen shrugged. "War has a way of taking men far from home." Understanding flickered in her eyes. "You fought for the Union?" He nodded once. "My father was an army surgeon," she offered. We were in Washington during the war. I helped in the hospitals sometimes." That explained her comfort with blood and sickness, Owen thought. He'd seen army surgeons and their assistants working after battles, grim, efficient people who couldn't afford the luxury of squeamishness. "What brings you to Redemption Creek?" she asked, just passing through. His standard answer: "Most people who pass through don't offer to escort strangers on medical rounds." Owen felt a flicker of irritation. She was persistent. "Maybe I don't like the idea of Miller and his boys preying on the sick." "A noble sentiment," she said, though her tone suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. "Have you been a lawman?" "No," he replied shortly. "Bounty hunter, sometimes." That seemed to interest her. "Dangerous work. Pays well enough." "Is that why you're heading north, chasing a bounty?" Owen hesitated, then decided there was no harm in answering. "Heard about work at a ranch near the Canadian border. Good winter wages." She nodded, seeming to accept this. The conversation lapsed into silence again as they followed the winding path along Cottonwood Creek. The terrain grew more rugged, with scattered pine forests and rocky outcroppings breaking up the grasslands. An hour later, they approached a small wooden cabin set against a hillside. Smoke rose from the chimney, and a weathered barn stood nearby with a few cattle in a fenced pasture. "The Wilsons," Olivia explained. "Their boy Tommy has been sick for nearly a week." As they dismounted, a haggard-looking man emerged from the cabin, rifle in hand. When he recognized Olivia, the weapon lowered and relief washed over his face. "Miss Hayes, thank the Lord." "Tommy's fever broke last night, but Mary's taken ill now." "I've brought more willow bark and medicine, Mr. Wilson," she said reassuringly. "And this is Mr. Blackwood. He's riding with me today." Wilson nodded to Owen, though his eyes held the natural suspicion of an isolated farmer toward a stranger. Owen returned the nod but remained by the horses as Olivia took her medical bag and followed Wilson into the cabin. She emerged 30 minutes later, her expression tired but satisfied. "Mary's fever isn't as high as Tommy's was. I've left medicine and instructions. They should be fine if they follow them carefully." They continued this pattern throughout the day, riding to isolated homesteads, where Olivia would check on sick children and parents, dispense medicine and advice, while Owen kept watch outside. At each place, he noted how the families greeted her with a mixture of respect and relief. She was clearly a lifeline for these people, too far from town to reach the doctor easily. By late afternoon, they had visited 3 of the 4 homesteads. The sun was beginning its descent toward the western mountains when they approached the final farm, the Hansen place. Something felt wrong to Owen as they crested a small rise overlooking the property. The farmhouse door stood open, but there was no smoke from the chimney despite the cooling air, no movement around the barn or chicken coop. "Wait," he said sharply, reaching out to grab Olivia's reins. She pulled up, looking at him questioningly. "What is it? Something's not right." Owen scanned the property with narrowed eyes. Doors open, no smoke, no movement. Olivia's face paled. "The Hansens have 3 children, all sick with fever, Mrs. Hansen was bedridden herself when I visited 4 days ago." "Stay here," Owen ordered, drawing his revolver and dismounting. "I will not," she replied firmly, swinging down from her horse. "Those children are my patients." Owen clenched his jaw in frustration. "Then stay behind me at least." To his surprise, she nodded, taking her rifle but allowing him to lead the way down the slope toward the silent farmhouse. They approached cautiously, Owen's senses heightened by years of tracking both animals and men. The yard was eerily quiet except for a chicken scratching in the dirt. No dog barked to announce their arrival, though Owen had seen a border collie at the other farms. The hair on the back of his neck stood up as they neared the open door. "Mr. Hansen?" Olivia called. "It's Olivia Hayes." No answer came from the shadowy interior. Owen motioned for her to stay back as he stepped onto the porch, his revolver ready. The floorboards creaked under his weight. He peered into the dim cabin, allowing his eyes to adjust to the darkness after the bright afternoon sun. The scene inside confirmed his worst fears. Furniture was overturned, a table broken, and items scattered across the floor, signs of a struggle, not illness. He entered cautiously, scanning for movement or threats. "Owen," Olivia's voice was tense behind him. "Stay back," he warned, but she was already following him inside. He heard her sharp intake of breath as she saw the disarray. "Where are they?" The children, a soft moan from the back room interrupted her. They both moved quickly toward the sound, Owen leading with his gun still drawn. In a small bedroom they found Mrs. Hanson lying on the floor, blood matting her hair where she'd been struck on the head. Olivia immediately knelt beside her, medical instincts taking over. "Mrs. Hanson, it's Olivia. Can you hear me?" The woman's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and confused. "Miss Hayes, they took them. They took my babies." Owen's blood ran cold. "Who took them, madam?" "4 men, came for food and money," she whispered. "John tried to fight, they shot him." Olivia looked up at Owen, horror in her eyes. "The Miller gang," Mrs. Hanson nodded weakly. "Took John's body. Said they'd come back for me, took my children as hostages," Owen finished grimly. He'd seen it before, outlaws taking children to prevent parents from immediately reporting to authorities. "When?" "This morning, early." The woman's voice was fading. Olivia was already opening her medical bag. "She has a severe concussion. I need to tend to her." Owen nodded, stepping back to give her room to work. His mind was racing. If the Miller gang had taken the Hanson children this morning, they couldn't have gone far with 3 sick children in tow. They would need shelter, a place to hole up. He moved through the rest of the small cabin, taking note of details others might miss. A man's body had been dragged from the main room, a blood trail led out the back door. Food stores had been ransacked. 4 men, based on boot prints in the dirt and flour spilled on the floor. By the time he returned to the bedroom, Olivia had bandaged Mrs. Hanson's head and helped her onto the bed. "She needs to get to town, to the doctor," Olivia said quietly. "And the children need to be found," Owen replied. "The Millers won't keep sick children alive long if they become a burden." Fear flashed across Olivia's face, but she nodded resolutely. "Mrs. Hanson said they went north, toward the old mining camps in the hills. But I can't leave her. I'll find the children," Owen said, decision made. "You get her to town. Alone, against 4 armed men, not my first time tracking outlaws." He checked his revolver and rifle. "Those kids won't survive long in their condition. There's no time to ride for help." Olivia stood, her face set in determination. "Then I'm coming with you." "No." Owen's voice was firm. "Mrs. Hanson needs medical attention, and you need to alert the town. Get a posse together. By the time a posse is formed and reaches those hills, those children could be dead," she argued. "I know their medical condition. I know what they need." Owen stared at her, frustration building. She was right about the time factor, but taking a woman along to confront the Miller gang was madness. "Mr. Wilson's place is only an hour south," Olivia continued, seeing his hesitation. "We can stop there, ask him to take Mrs. Hanson to town while we continue after the children." It was a reasonable compromise, though every instinct told Owen that involving Olivia in a confrontation with killers like the Millers was a mistake. But the image of 3 sick children in the hands of men who wouldn't hesitate to kill them kept him from arguing further. "Fine," he conceded. "But when we find them, you stay back until I secure the situation." They worked quickly, making Mrs. Hanson as comfortable as possible for transport. Owen found a travois behind the barn, likely used by the Hansons for hauling firewood. They attached it to Olivia's mare, carefully placed Mrs. Hanson on it, and covered her with blankets. The journey to the Wilson farm seemed endless, though it took just over an hour. "Mr. Wilson agreed immediately to take Mrs. Hanson to town, his face grim when they explained the situation. "Been fearing something like this would happen," he said as he hitched his wagon. "Them Miller boys getting bolder every month, and the marshal in town too old to do much about it." "We're going after the children," Olivia told him. "Please tell the marshal to send men to the old mining camps north of here." Wilson nodded, though he looked doubtful. "You two be careful. The Millers don't take prisoners except when it suits them." As Wilson drove away with Mrs. Hanson, Owen turned to Olivia. "Last chance to reconsider. Following outlaws into the hills isn't what you signed up for this morning." Her blue eyes met his unflinchingly. Those children are my responsibility. I'm coming." Owen nodded, respecting her determination even as he questioned her judgment. "Then we ride hard. We've got maybe 2 hours of daylight left." They mounted fresh horses borrowed from Wilson's stable, leaving their tired mounts behind. Owen led the way north, following a faint trail that wound into the pine-covered foothills. As they rode, he explained his plan. "There are 3 abandoned mining camps in these hills. Most likely they're heading for the furthest one. It has the best defensive position. If we push hard, we might catch them before they reach it." "And then?" Olivia asked. "Then I create a distraction while you get to the children," she frowned. "That's not much of a plan. Plans get complicated, people die," Owen replied tersely. "Simple is better." They rode in tense silence as the terrain grew steeper and the pine forest thickened around them. Owen kept his eyes on the trail, noting broken branches, disturbed earth, and other signs that a group had passed this way. The Miller gang wasn't being careful about covering their tracks, confident that no one would pursue them quickly. The sun was touching the mountain peaks when Owen raised his hand, signaling Olivia to stop. He dismounted silently, motioning for her to do the same. "What is it?" she whispered. "Smoke, up ahead." He pointed through the trees where a thin column of smoke rose against the darkening sky. "First mining camp. They've stopped earlier than I expected." "The children," Olivia said with quiet urgency. "They must have been too sick to continue." Owen nodded grimly. "We'll approach on foot. Leave the horses here." They secured their mounts to a tree and moved forward cautiously through the underbrush. Owen led the way, moving with the silent grace of a man accustomed to stalking both prey and people. To her credit, Olivia followed his example, stepping carefully to avoid snapping twigs or rustling leaves. The abandoned mining camp came into view, 3 dilapidated wooden structures surrounding a central clearing. Light flickered from the largest building, an old bunkhouse. 4 horses were tied to a hitching post outside. Owen and Olivia crouched behind a fallen log at the edge of the clearing, observing the scene. There was no sign of movement outside the bunkhouse, but voices carried on the evening air. "Told you taking them kids was a mistake," a gruff voice complained. "Now we got 3 sick brats to deal with." "Shut up, Elias," another voice responded. "We'll dump him once we're sure nobody's following us." Olivia's hand tightened on Owen's arm, her face pale in the fading light. He placed his finger to his lips, then whispered, "4 men inside, can't tell where the children are." "We need to get closer," she whispered back. Owen considered their options. A frontal assault was suicide. 4 against 1 were poor odds, especially with children caught in the crossfire. Stealth was their only advantage. "There's a back entrance to these bunkhouses usually," he murmured. "I'll circle around, see if I can get a better look. You stay here." She nodded reluctantly, and Owen slipped away, moving through the shadows with practiced ease. He circled the camp, keeping to the tree line until he reached the rear of the bunkhouse. As he'd expected, a back door stood partially open, allowing smoke from the fireplace to escape the stuffy interior. From this position, he could see through gaps in the wooden walls. 4 men sat around a fire in the main room, passing a bottle between them. Their rifles leaned against the wall nearby. In the far corner, 3 small shapes huddled together on a filthy mattress, the Hanson children. Owen returned to Olivia's position and quickly explained what he'd seen. "The children are alive, but they look weak. All 4 Millers are in the main room, drinking." "We need to create a distraction," Olivia said. "Get them away from the children." Owen nodded. "I'll circle to the east side of the camp and set fire to one of the other buildings. When they run out to deal with it, you slip in the back door and get the children. Head straight for the horses, I'll meet you there." "What about you?" "I'll keep them busy," he said grimly. Olivia studied his face in the growing darkness. "That's a dangerous plan. Got a better one." She shook her head. "Be careful, Owen." The use of his first name caught him off guard. He nodded once, then melted back into the forest before she could see the conflict on his face. Getting attached to people led to mistakes. He'd learned that lesson the hard way. Owen moved silently to the smallest of the 3 buildings. An old tool shed some distance from the bunkhouse. He gathered dry pine needles and small branches, piling them against the wooden structure. From his saddlebag, he took a small tin of lucifer matches. The dry wood caught quickly, flames licking up the side of the old shed. Owen moved back into the shadows, circling toward the horses. He drew his revolver, waiting. The reaction was immediate. Shouts erupted from the bunkhouse, followed by the sound of boots on wooden floors. The door burst open, and 3 of the Miller brothers rushed out, cursing at the sight of the burning shed. "Fire! Get water!" the tallest one yelled. Owen watched as they scrambled toward a water barrel near the hitching post. Only 3 had emerged. The 4th must have stayed with the children. This complicated matters. Owen changed position, moving closer to the bunkhouse. Through the still open door, he could see the 4th Miller standing near the corner where the children lay, looking nervously toward the commotion outside. Owen caught a flash of movement as Olivia slipped toward the back of the bunkhouse. She'd be walking into danger if she entered now, with one of the gang still inside. Making a split-second decision, Owen fired his revolver into the air. The sharp crack echoed through the clearing. "Miller." He shouted, "You're surrounded, release the children." It was a desperate bluff, but it had the desired effect. The 3 men at the water barrel scattered for cover, reaching for weapons that weren't at their sides. Inside, the 4th man rushed to the front door, drawing his pistol. Owen fired again, this time aiming at the doorframe. Wood splintered, and the man ducked back inside. For a moment, confusion reigned as the Miller gang tried to determine how many attackers they faced and from which direction. Using the distraction, Owen sprinted across the open ground to the side of the bunkhouse, pressing himself against the wall. He could hear the brothers shouting to each other. "How many are there? Circle around back. Get the kids, there are insurance." That last command spurred Owen to action. He moved to the front corner of the building and risked a quick glance inside. 2 of the brothers were now at the front windows, peering out cautiously. One was heading toward the children, while the 4th had disappeared, likely going to check the back door. Owen took aim and fired twice in rapid succession. The shots weren't meant to hit, only to keep the Millers focused on the front of the building while Olivia hopefully extracted the children from the back. A bullet splintered the wood near his head, forcing him to duck back. The Millers were returning fire now, gaining confidence as they realized they might not be as outnumbered as they initially feared. Owen moved again, staying low, working his way toward the hitching post where the horses were tethered. If Olivia managed to get the children out, this would be their rendezvous point. Another shot rang out, but this one came from the back of the bunkhouse. Owen's heart raced. Had they found Olivia, he changed direction immediately, circling toward the rear of the building. As he rounded the corner, he saw one of the Miller brothers sprawled on the ground, clutching his shoulder. Standing over him, Olivia held a smoking revolver, her face set in grim determination. Behind her, 3 small children huddled together, the oldest boy supporting his younger siblings. "Move," Olivia ordered the wounded man, gesturing with the revolver. "Toward the trees." Owen stepped forward, keeping his own weapon trained on the wounded outlaw. "Olivia, get the children to the horses." She looked up, relief washing over her face at the sight of him. "Owen." "There are 3 more inside, I know. Go now." The wounded Miller chose that moment to lunge at Olivia despite his injury. Owen fired without hesitation, the bullet striking the man's leg. He collapsed with a howl of pain. "Go," Owen repeated urgently. This time, Olivia obeyed, gathering the children and hurrying them toward the hitching post. Owen covered their retreat, keeping his revolver trained on the bunkhouse doors and windows. Shouts from inside indicated the remaining brothers had realized something was wrong. Gunfire erupted from the front of the building, but it was aimed at shadows, not at Olivia and the children who were now behind the structure. Owen backed away slowly, maintaining his cover fire until he was certain Olivia had reached the horses. The fire he'd set had spread to the second building now, illuminating the clearing with flickering orange light that created confusing, dancing shadows, perfect cover for their escape. He reached the hitching post to find Olivia already mounting one of the Miller's horses, the smallest child held securely in front of her. The two older children clung to each other beside her. "Take this one," Owen said, cutting loose another horse and lifting the older children onto its back. "Follow the trail back, I'll be right behind you." "Owen," Olivia began, concern evident in her voice. "Go," he insisted. "I'll cover your retreat." She hesitated only a moment longer before spurring her horse forward, leading the second mount with the older children. They disappeared into the darkness of the forest trail just as the remaining Miller brothers emerged from the bunkhouse, guns blazing. Owen fired his last 2 rounds, forcing them back into cover. Then he mounted the third horse, cut the fourth loose to create confusion, and galloped after Olivia and the children. Bullets whistled past him as he rode, but the darkness and the tangled forest soon swallowed him. Behind him, angry shouts faded as distance grew between them and the burning mining camp. He caught up to Olivia about a mile down the trail. She had stopped to check on the children, who were huddled together on their horse, shivering in the cool night air. "They're burning with fever," she said worriedly as Owen dismounted beside her. "We need to get them somewhere warm and safe." Owen nodded, already scanning the trail behind them. "The Millers will be following as soon as they gather their wits." "We can't go back to the Wilson place, that's the first place they'll look." "There's a line shack about 3 miles east of here," Olivia said. "The Bar T Ranch uses it during Roundup. It should be empty this time of year." "Can the children make it that far?" Olivia checked the youngest child, a girl no more than 5 years old who lay limply in her arms. "They have to. They need medicine and warmth." Owen helped secure the children more comfortably on the horses before they set off again, heading east across the rugged terrain. The moon had risen, providing just enough light to navigate by. The children were alarmingly quiet, too weak from illness and trauma to complain. The line shack appeared as Olivia had described, a simple one-room structure with a stone fireplace, nestled in a small clearing surrounded by pine trees. Owen checked it carefully before allowing Olivia to bring the children inside. It was sparse but clean, with a small wood stove, a rough table, 2 chairs, and a narrow cot. Owen quickly started a fire in the stove while Olivia settled the children on the cot, covering them with the single blanket she found on a shelf. "I need water," she said, opening her medical bag, "and more blankets if possible." Owen nodded, heading back outside to retrieve their saddlebags. There was a small stream nearby where he filled their canteens. Upon returning, he found Olivia mixing medicine from her supplies, her movements efficient despite her obvious exhaustion. "How are they?" he asked quietly. "The fever's high in all 3, she replied, not looking up from her work. "Especially the youngest, Abigail. The boys, Thomas and Samuel, are a little stronger, but they're severely dehydrated." Owen watched as she gently coaxed each child to swallow the medicine, speaking in soft, reassuring tones. Her hands were steady, her focus absolute. In that moment, he realized he'd underestimated her. Olivia Hayes wasn't just determined, she was formidable. "You saved their lives," he said after she had finished tending to the children. "That was good shooting back there." Olivia looked up, surprise crossing her features. "I've never shot a man before," she admitted. "Father taught me to use a revolver for protection, but..." She trailed off, her hands trembling slightly now that the immediate crisis had passed. "You did what you had to do," Owen said. "He'll live." She nodded, taking a deep breath to steady herself. "What about the Millers? Will they come after us?" "Likely," Owen replied honestly. "But they don't know about this place and they'll be searching in the dark. We should be safe until morning. And then we get these children to town." Owen moved to the door. "I'll keep watch. You should rest while you can." Olivia shook her head. "I need to monitor the children. Their fevers could spike during the night." Owen didn't argue. He stepped outside, positioning himself where he could watch the surrounding forest while still keeping the shack's door in view. The night was quiet except for the occasional hoot of an owl or rustle of small creatures in the underbrush. Hours passed. Owen remained vigilant, his thoughts turning over the events of the day. When he'd ridden into Redemption Creek that morning, he'd been a man determined to avoid any human connection. Now he found himself responsible for 3 sick children and a woman whose courage both impressed and worried him. It was well past midnight when Olivia joined him outside, wrapping her shawl tightly around her shoulders against the chill night air. "The children are sleeping," she said quietly, sitting beside him on a fallen log. "Their fevers have come down a little." Owen nodded, relieved. "Good." They sat in silence for a moment, the vast canopy of stars stretching above them. The mountains loomed as dark shadows against the night sky. "Thank you," Olivia said suddenly, "for helping me, for saving those children." Owen shifted uncomfortably. "You'd have found a way without me." "Perhaps," she conceded, "but I'm glad I didn't have to." Another silence fell between them, less tense than before. "Why did you really offer to escort me today?" she asked finally, turning to study his profile in the moonlight. Owen considered deflecting the question but found himself answering honestly instead. "Don't rightly know," seemed like the thing to do at the time. Most men passing through town don't put themselves in danger for strangers. "I'm not most men," he replied simply. "No," she agreed softly. "You're not." Something in her tone made Owen glance at her. Her blue eyes reflected the starlight, and there was a gentleness in her expression that made him look away quickly. "You should get some rest," he said gruffly. "Tomorrow will be difficult." Olivia stood, but paused before returning to the shack. "Whatever your reasons, Owen Blackwood, I'm grateful our paths crossed today." He nodded once, not trusting himself to speak. After she had gone back inside, Owen remained motionless, his gaze fixed on the dark forest but his thoughts elsewhere. Dawn broke clear and cold, painting the eastern sky in shades of pink and gold. Owen, who had maintained his vigil through the night, rose stiffly from his position and stretched his tall frame. No sign of pursuit had appeared, but he remained wary. Inside the shack, he found Olivia asleep in a chair beside the cot where the three Hanson children slumbered. She had somehow maintained her watch over them despite her exhaustion. A strand of honey-blonde hair had escaped her braid, falling across her cheek. In sleep, the determined set of her jaw had softened, making her look younger and more vulnerable. Owen hesitated, reluctant to wake her, but they needed to move while they had daylight. He gently touched her shoulder. "Olivia," he said quietly, her eyes opened immediately, alert despite her fatigue. "The children, still sleeping, how are they?" She rose, checking each child with a practiced touch to their foreheads. "Better. The fevers have broken, though they're still weak." "We need to move," Owen said. "The Millers will be searching in earnest now that it's light." Olivia nodded, gathering her medical supplies. "The nearest town is Redemption Creek. It's about 15 miles south." "Too obvious," Owen replied, shaking his head. "The Millers will expect us to head there. There's a small settlement called Silver Bend about 10 miles east of here. I passed through it before reaching Redemption Creek." "Silver Bend has no doctor," Olivia pointed out, "but it has a telegraph office. We can wire for the marshal and for medical help from the county seat." Owen checked his ammunition. "The Millers won't expect us to head east." Olivia considered this, then nodded. "You're right. And the children are stable enough to travel that far if we're careful." They worked quickly to prepare for departure. The children were groggy but conscious, able to take water and a little food from the line shack's meager supplies. Owen fashioned a more comfortable seat on one of the horses for the youngest child, while Olivia secured the two boys on the second mount. As the sun cleared the eastern mountains, they set out, Owen leading the way through the forest rather than following the established trails. It was slower going, but less likely to lead them into an ambush. "Have you always been on your own?" Olivia asked as they rode side by side through a small meadow, the children dozing on horseback ahead of them. Owen glanced at her, surprised by the personal question. "Since the war, mostly." "That's a long time to be alone," he shrugged. "Simpler that way." "Simpler," she repeated thoughtfully. "But lonely, I would think, never bothered me." The lie came automatically, practiced over years. Olivia didn't respond immediately, her gaze fixed on the children ahead. "When my father died, everyone in Redemption Creek expected me to sell his practice and move back east, or find a husband quickly." Owen raised an eyebrow, waiting for her to continue. "I considered it," she admitted. "Moving back to Boston, where we had family. But then I realized how many people depended on my father's services. How many would suffer without medical care? So you stayed, she nodded. I stayed, learned more from Dr. Farrell in town, made my rounds to the homesteads, built a life. She glanced at Owen. It was hard at first, being alone. But the work gave me purpose. Owen understood that better than he cared to admit. Purpose was what kept a person moving forward when connections to others were severed or avoided. What about you? She asked. What gives you purpose, Owen Blackwood? The question caught him off guard. He'd been drifting for so long, taking whatever work kept him in food and ammunition, moving on before roots could form. What purpose did that serve? Survival, he finally answered. Olivia studied his face. That's not purpose, that's existence. The blunt assessment stung because it contained truth. Owen frowned, focusing on the trail ahead rather than meeting her perceptive gaze. Some men aren't meant for more than that, he said flatly. I don't believe that, she replied, her voice gentle but firm. Every person has the capacity for more. Before Owen could respond, a sharp crack echoed through the trees, a rifle shot. His instincts took over immediately. Down, he shouted, spurring his horse forward to reach the children as another shot splintered a tree trunk nearby. Olivia reacted instantly, closing the distance to the children's horses and pulling them off the trail into the shelter of a rocky outcropping. Owen dismounted in one fluid motion, rifle in hand, scanning the surrounding forest for the source of the shots. Stay with the children, he ordered, moving to position himself between them and the unseen attackers. Another shot rang out, closer this time. Owen caught a flash of movement among the trees about 100 yards to their north. He raised his rifle, took careful aim, and fired. A shout of pain rewarded his effort. At least 2 of them, he told Olivia, who had drawn her revolver while keeping the frightened children behind her. Maybe more. We're trapped here, she said, assessing their position. The rocky outcropping provided cover from one direction, but they were exposed if the attackers circled around. Owen knew she was right. They had maybe minutes before the Millers surrounded them. His mind raced through options, none of them good. There's a steep ravine about 50 yards east of here, he said, making a decision. If you can get the children there, you'll have better cover and a path down to the valley floor. Olivia's eyes widened as she understood what he wasn't saying. And you, I'll keep them busy. Give you time to get away. No, she said firmly, we stay together. Another bullet struck the rocks above them, showering them with stone fragments. The youngest child began to cry, and Olivia instinctively pulled her closer. Olivia, Owen said urgently, those children need to reach safety. You're the only one who can get them there. She stared at him, conflict evident in her expression. And what about you? You expect me to just leave you here to die? I expect you to do what needs doing, he replied. Same as you've always done. Before she could argue further, multiple shots rang out from the forest. The Millers were getting bolder, moving closer. Go, Owen insisted, returning fire to keep the attackers at bay. Head east to the ravine, then south toward Silver Bend. Don't stop for anything. Tears glistened in Olivia's eyes, but her jaw set with determination. You'd better be right behind us, Owen Blackwood. She gathered the children quickly, helping them remount the horses. Owen provided covering fire as they slipped away through the trees, heading east as he'd directed. Once they were out of sight, Owen changed position, moving north to draw the Millers' attention away from Olivia's escape route. He fired several times, then quickly relocated, creating the impression of multiple defenders. The strategy worked. Return fire concentrated on his position, allowing Olivia and the children precious minutes to put distance between themselves and the danger. Owen continued this deadly game of cat and mouse for nearly half an hour, circling through the forest, firing occasionally, then moving before the Millers could pinpoint his location. He counted 3 distinct weapons firing back at him. The 4th brother was either dead or too badly wounded to participate. Eventually, though, his luck ran out. As he moved between positions, a bullet grazed his left arm, tearing through his sleeve and leaving a burning furrow in his flesh. He dropped to the ground, biting back a curse as blood soaked his shirt from his prone position. Owen spotted one of the Miller brothers about 60 yards away, moving cautiously through the underbrush. He took careful aim and fired, satisfaction coursing through him as the man fell with a cry of pain. Two left, he thought grimly, pressing his hand against his wounded arm to slow the bleeding. He needed to move again, but fatigue from the sleepless night and blood loss was beginning to take its toll. Owen forced himself to his feet, swaying slightly before steadying himself against a tree trunk. A voice called out from the forest. "Give it up, mister. You can't take all of us." Owen remained silent, conserving his strength and ammunition. Let them wonder if he was still alive, still a threat. "We just want them kids as insurance," the voice continued. "Nobody needs to die here." That was a lie. Owen knew the Miller gang left no witnesses. If they caught up to Olivia and the children, all four would be killed once they'd served their purpose as hostages. He checked his rifle, 3 rounds left. His revolver held 5 bullets against 2 desperate outlaws, not the worst odds he'd faced. Owen moved again, pushing deeper into the forest in the opposite direction from Olivia's escape route. If he could lead the Millers far enough away, she and the children might reach Silver Bend safely. The pursuit continued for another hour, a deadly game of stealth and patience. Owen's wound throbbed and his movements grew slower, more deliberate. He managed to wound another Miller brother with a well-placed shot, but the last one remained elusive, circling around to try to flank him. The terrain grew steeper as Owen climbed higher into the foothills. His breath came in ragged gasps and sweat ran down his face despite the cool morning air. He found temporary shelter behind a massive fallen pine, taking a moment to bind his wounded arm with a strip torn from his shirt. The forest had gone quiet, no shots, no voices calling out. That worried Owen more than the earlier pursuit. The last Miller brother was hunting now, moving silently, closing in. Owen strained his senses, listening for any sound that might betray his pursuer's position. A slight rustle of pine needles to his right made him freeze, finger tightening on the trigger of his rifle. A twig snapped, closer now. Owen slowly shifted his position, aiming toward the sound. The attack came from the left instead a rush of movement as the last Miller brother charged from behind a nearby boulder. Owen swung his rifle around, but too late. The outlaw crashed into him, sending them both tumbling down a short, steep slope. They landed hard, Owen's rifle spinning away into the underbrush. He rolled to his feet, drawing his revolver as Miller recovered his own balance. They faced each other in a small clearing, weapons raised, each man breathing heavily. "You've caused us a lot of trouble, mister," Miller growled. Blood stained the left side of his face from a wound near his hairline. "Killed 2 of my brothers." "You took innocent children hostage," Owen replied coldly. "Be grateful you're still breathing." Miller's eyes narrowed. "Not for long, I reckon. Where's the woman and the kids?" "Far from here by now." A twisted smile crossed the outlaw's face. "Don't matter. Elias is circling around to cut them off. Figured you might be a distraction." Owen's blood ran cold at the realization. He'd assumed all 3 brothers were pursuing him, but if one had broken off to track Olivia and the children. His momentary distraction was all Miller needed. The outlaw lunged forward, firing as he moved. Pain exploded in Owen's right shoulder as the bullet struck him, the impact spinning him halfway around. Owen's own gun discharged, the bullet going wide. He staggered, fighting to stay on his feet as Miller closed the distance between them, a look of triumph on his weathered face. "End of the trail for you," Miller said, raising his revolver for a killing shot. The crack of a rifle shot echoed through the clearing, but it wasn't Miller's gun that had fired. The outlaw's expression froze in surprise as a red stain blossomed on his chest. He looked down at the wound in confusion, then crumpled to the ground. Owen turned painfully toward the source of the shot. Olivia stood at the edge of the clearing, rifle still raised, her face a mask of grim determination. "Olivia," he gasped, shock and relief warring within him. "The children, safe," she said, lowering the rifle and rushing to his side. "Hidden in the ravine, I couldn't leave you to face them alone." Owen wanted to be angry that she'd returned, putting herself in danger, but the pain and blood loss were making it difficult to focus. "You said." "There was another, Elias." Already taken care of, she replied, helping him sit against a tree trunk. He found us at the ravine, made the mistake of thinking a woman with a rifle wouldn't shoot him. Her voice was steady, but Owen could see the toll the violence had taken in her eyes. You're full of surprises, he managed, wincing as she examined his wounds. Hold still, she ordered, opening her medical bag. The shoulder wound is clean through and through, but you've lost a lot of blood. Owen watched as she worked efficiently to clean and bandage his injuries, her hands gentle despite their firmness. The pain receded somewhat under her ministrations, replaced by a growing warmth that had nothing to do with his wounds. Why did you come back? He asked quietly. Olivia's hands paused momentarily before resuming their work. Because no one should face death alone, she said simply. Because you were willing to sacrifice yourself for 3 children you'd never met before yesterday. She secured the last bandage and met his gaze directly. Because you matter, Owen Blackwood, whether you believe it or not. Something shifted inside him at her words, a crack in the wall he'd built around himself over years of solitude and mistrust. He wanted to deny it, to pull away from the dangerous vulnerability her presence created, but he found himself unable to look away from the truth in her blue eyes. We need to get you to Silver Bend, she said, helping him to his feet. Can you ride? Owen nodded, though standing sent waves of dizziness through him. The children, I'll bring them up from the ravine, wait here. She disappeared into the forest, returning minutes later with the 3 Hanson children, all looking frightened but unharmed. The oldest boy was supporting his younger brother, while Olivia carried little Abigail. Somehow, they managed to get everyone mounted. Owen gritted his teeth against the pain as Olivia helped him onto his horse. She secured Abigail in front of him, where he could hold her with his less injured arm. Silver Bend is about 5 miles south, Olivia said, mounting her own horse with the 2 boys. If we go slowly, we can make it by midday. The journey passed in a haze of pain for Owen. He focused on staying conscious, on keeping the small child secure in front of him. Olivia rode close beside him, her presence a steady anchor as they made their way through the forest and down into the valley beyond. Silver Bend appeared on the horizon, a small settlement of perhaps 20 buildings nestled at the base of the mountains. As they approached, people emerged from stores and houses, drawn by the unusual sight of 2 blood-stained riders with 3 exhausted children. We need help, Olivia called out as they reached the main street. These children are ill and this man is wounded. Within moments, they were surrounded by concerned townspeople. Hands reached up to take the children, others to help Owen dismount. The local barber, who served as the town's medical man, directed them to his shop. Telegraph the marshal in the county seat, Olivia instructed as they were led inside. The Miller gang attacked the Hanson homestead. The parents need help, and there are outlaws dead or wounded in the hills north of here. The next few hours blurred together for Owen. He remembered the barber treating his wounds more thoroughly, remembered Olivia's voice giving instructions. Remembered the relief on her face when the telegraph operator reported that a marshal and doctor were on their way from the county seat. By evening, Owen found himself in a small room above the town's only hotel, his wounds properly bandaged, his body clean for the first time in days. The Hanson children were in the adjoining room, being watched over by the hotel owner's wife while Olivia finally took some rest herself. A soft knock at the door roused him from a light doze. Olivia entered, looking tired but composed, her hair freshly braided and her clothes changed. "How are you feeling?" she asked, moving to check his bandages. "I've been shot worse," he replied, attempting a smile that turned into a grimace. "That's not particularly reassuring," she said dryly, but her own lips curved slightly. The children, resting comfortably, their fevers are gone and they've eaten well. They're asking about their parents. Olivia sat in the chair beside his bed. The telegraph brought news that Mrs. Hanson is recovering in Redemption Creek. Mr. Wilson got her there safely. And Mr. Hanson, her expression sobered. "I'm afraid he didn't survive. The Millers killed him during the raid." Owen closed his eyes briefly, sorrow and anger mingling within him. Another family torn apart by senseless violence. The children will need someone to look after them. Mrs. Hanson has a sister in Bozeman, Olivia said. The marshal will arrange for them to travel there once Mrs. Hanson is well enough. They sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, the events of the past 2 days settling around them like falling leaves. The marshal should arrive tomorrow, Olivia finally said. He'll want statements from both of us about what happened, Owen nodded. Once the official business was concluded, there would be no reason for him to stay. The thought brought an unexpected hollowness to his chest. What will you do after? Olivia asked quietly, as if reading his thoughts. He'd had a plan before all this head north, find work at that ranch for the winter. It had seemed simple enough 2 days ago. Now the prospect of riding away alone again felt strangely empty. Not sure, he admitted. You, return to Redemption Creek, continue my rounds. She hesitated, then added, though I suspect they'll be less eventful without you along. Owen found himself studying her face, the quiet strength in her features, the intelligence in her blue eyes, the slight upturn at the corners of her mouth that suggested she smiled more often in better times. You're good at what you do, he said. Those children would have died without you. We saved them together, she corrected gently. I couldn't have done it alone. Another silence fell between them, this one charged with unspoken thoughts and feelings Owen wasn't ready to examine too closely. You should rest, Olivia said finally, rising from the chair. The marshal will want a clear account tomorrow. Owen caught her hand as she turned to leave, surprising both of them with the gesture. Thank you, he said simply, for coming back. She looked down at their joined hands, then met his gaze with an openness that made his breath catch. Some things are worth the risk, Owen. After she left, Owen lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling, his thoughts in turmoil. In 2 days, this woman had challenged everything he'd believed about himself, about the walls he'd built to keep the world at a safe distance. Morning brought clear skies and the arrival of Marshal James Harker, a competent-looking man in his 40s with a no-nonsense demeanor. He interviewed Owen and Olivia separately, taking detailed notes about the attack on the Hanson homestead and the subsequent pursuit and confrontation with the Miller gang. You two took a hell of a risk, he commented when they'd finished, shaking his head with grudging admiration. But you saved those children's lives. The county judge will want to thank you personally. We did what anyone would do, Olivia replied modestly. The marshal snorted. Madam, I've been enforcing the law in this territory for 15 years. Most folks would have ridden the other way if they'd seen the Miller gang's tracks. He turned to Owen. You a lawman before? No, sir, Owen replied. Just happened to be passing through. Well, the territory could use men like you. Marshal Harker stood, gathering his notes. I've got men retrieving the bodies and any survivors from the hills. Judge Parker has authorized a reward for the Millers, $500. It's yours by rights. Owen blinked in surprise. We weren't hunting bounty. Makes no difference. Reward stands. The marshal tipped his hat. I'll have the paperwork ready before I leave tomorrow. You two rest up now. After he'd gone, Owen and Olivia sat in stunned silence. $500, she finally said. That's a small fortune out here. Owen nodded slowly. Such a sum could change a person's circumstances significantly. It could buy land, livestock, a fresh start somewhere. What will you do with your share? He asked. Olivia considered the question. The medical clinic in Redemption Creek needs supplies, and there are families who can't afford treatment. She smiled slightly. $250 would help a great many people. Her selflessness didn't surprise him, Owen realized. It was consistent with everything he'd observed about her character over the past days. And you, she asked, will you continue north as you planned? The question hung in the air between them, heavier than it should have been. 2 days ago, the answer would have been simple. Now, I don't know, he admitted honestly. That evening, they had dinner together in the small hotel dining room. The Hanson children joined them briefly before being taken back to their room by the hotel owner's wife. They were remarkably resilient, as children often were, already beginning to recover from their ordeal. They'll be all right, Olivia said, watching them go. Children heal quickly in body if not always in spirit. And their mother, she'll have a harder time, losing her husband, nearly losing her children. Olivia's voice softened, but she's strong and she'll have help. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the events of the past days gradually giving way to more ordinary conversation. Owen found himself telling Olivia about his childhood in Pennsylvania, about his father's small horse farm, about joining the Union Army at 18. "I never went back after the war," he admitted. "Nothing left to go back to. Farm was sold to pay debts after Pa died. So you came west," he nodded. "Seemed like the right direction, away from the memories. And have you found what you were looking for?" Olivia asked, her gaze steady on his face. Owen considered the question. "Wasn't looking for anything in particular, just space, I guess, room to breathe without bumping into the past." "And yet the past travels with us, doesn't it?" she observed quietly, "no matter how far we ride." He studied her, wondering what ghost she carried beneath her composed exterior. "You sound like you know something about that." Olivia looked down at her plate, a shadow crossing her features. "My father didn't just teach me medicine, he was teaching me to survive his absence." She took a slow breath. He knew he was dying for 2 years before the end, heart condition, incurable. "I'm sorry," Owen said softly. "He made me promise to live, not just exist." Her eyes met his again with a warmth that reached past his defenses. "It was the hardest promise I've ever kept. Some days I still struggle with it." "You've done more than keep it," Owen said. "You've built something important here." A slight flush colored her cheeks at his words. "Perhaps, but it's lonely work sometimes." The admission hung in the air between them, an opening neither was quite ready to step through. The next morning, Marshal Harker returned with the promised paperwork and reward money. He also brought news that the remaining Miller brother had been captured alive. "He'll stand trial in Helena next month," the marshal informed them. "Along with 2 of their associates we caught near Redemption Creek. Seems they were planning to rob the bank there next." "Will you need us to testify?" Olivia asked. "Signed statements should suffice, but I'll send word if that changes." He handed them each an envelope containing their share of the reward. "You've done this territory a service, both of you." After the marshal departed, Owen and Olivia found themselves facing the inevitable moment of decision. The doctor from the county seat had arrived to escort the Hanson children back to Redemption Creek, where they would be reunited with their mother. There was nothing keeping them in Silver Bend any longer. They stood outside the hotel, their horses saddled and ready. The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty street as the small town came to life around them. "So," Olivia said, her voice carefully neutral. "North to that ranch job?" Owen looked down at the envelope in his hand, then at the road leading out of town. $500 was enough to start over somewhere, enough to buy a small piece of land, perhaps, build something permanent, but the thought of riding away alone no longer appealed as it once had. "Actually," he said slowly, "I was thinking about Redemption Creek." Olivia's head turned sharply toward him, surprise evident in her expression. "Redemption Creek? Why?" Owen met her gaze directly, taking a risk greater than any he'd faced against the Miller gang. "Heard they might need someone good with horses. Maybe helping keep an eye on those outlying homesteads." A slow smile spread across Olivia's face, lighting her blue eyes in a way that made Owen's chest tighten. "Is that so? Might be worth staying in one place for a while," he continued, his voice growing more certain with each word. "See what it's like to build something instead of just passing through. It would be a change for you," she observed, though her smile remained. Change might be overdue. Owen took a breath, then added, "And I hear the local medicine woman makes her rounds regularly. Might be she could use an escort who knows his way around a rifle." Olivia stepped closer, close enough that he could see the golden flecks in her blue eyes. "She might," she agreed softly, "though I should warn you she's stubborn, opinionated, and not particularly impressed by lone wolves." "Good thing I'm considering retirement from that profession then," Owen replied, the corner of his mouth lifting in a rare smile. They rode back to Redemption Creek together, the journey taking 2 days at an easy pace to accommodate Owen's healing wounds. They talked more freely than before, learning each other's stories, discovering common ground despite their different paths. By the time the familiar buildings of Redemption Creek appeared on the horizon, something had changed between them, a tentative trust building, brick by brick, like the foundation of a home neither had dared hope for. The town welcomed Olivia back with open arms and greeted Owen with cautious respect when the story of their confrontation with the Miller gang spread. The marshal's deputy had telegraphed ahead with the basic facts, and the Hanson children's safe return only enhanced their standing. Owen found lodging at the boarding house and, true to his word, began looking for work. Mr. Wilson, grateful for their help with Mrs. Hanson, offered him a position breaking horses at his small ranch outside town. It wasn't permanent, but it was a starter reason to stay that had nothing to do with the real reason he remained. Olivia resumed her medical practice, dividing her time between patients in town and those on distant homesteads. Owen often rode with her on these rounds, their partnership evolving naturally from the bonds formed during their ordeal. Weeks passed, and Owen found himself putting down tentative roots in Redemption Creek. He opened an account at the bank, made acquaintances at the saloon, attended a town social at Olivia's insistence. Small steps, each one bringing him further from the solitary existence he'd known for so long, and through it all, Olivia was there, never pushing, never demanding, but steadily present. Her quiet strength and unwavering integrity reminded Owen daily of the man he could be if he chose to be. Their first kiss came unexpectedly, on a crisp autumn evening as they returned from visiting the Wilsons' farm. They had stopped to rest the horses by a small stream, the setting sun painting the landscape in gold and amber. Olivia was describing her plans to expand her medical services, her face animated with enthusiasm for helping others. Owen found himself watching her lips as she spoke, wondering how he had lived so long without the warmth she brought into his life. When she paused, noticing his distraction, he acted on impulse rather than calculation for the first time in years. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, a question rather than a demand. When Olivia responded, her hand coming up to rest against his chest, the moment deepened into something neither had anticipated but both had secretly wanted. "I've been wanting to do that for weeks," Owen admitted when they finally drew apart, his voice rough with emotion. Olivia smiled, her eyes reflecting the sunset's glow. "What took you so long, Cowboy?" "Fear," he answered honestly. "Old habits." She touched his face gently, her fingertips tracing the line of his jaw. "Trust takes time to build. I understand that better than most." As winter settled over Redemption Creek, Owen and Olivia's relationship grew stronger. They became a familiar sight in town, the tall, quiet horseman and the dedicated healer, moving through life together with increasing confidence. Owen used his share of the reward money to purchase a small plot of land just outside town. With help from neighbors and friends he hadn't realized he'd made, he began building a modest house. Each nail driven, each board placed felt like an act of faith, a declaration that the future held more than just survival. On Christmas Eve, the town gathered for a celebration at the small church. Snow fell gently outside as families shared food and stories, children played, and for a few hours, the harshness of frontier life gave way to community and joy. Owen found Olivia outside, standing alone on the church steps, watching the snow gather on the silent street. He joined her, draping a warm shawl around her shoulders. "Everything all right?" he asked. She nodded, leaning slightly against him. "Just thinking about how much can change in a year. Last Christmas I was alone, wondering if I'd made the right choice staying here. And now." Olivia turned to face him, snowflakes catching in her honey blonde hair. "Now I'm certain of it." Owen took her hands in his, suddenly nervous in a way he hadn't been since boyhood. "I've been thinking about changes too." "Have you?" There was a hint of amusement in her voice, as if she could read his intentions. "The house will be finished by spring," he said. "It's not much compared to what you might have had back east, but it's perfect," she interrupted gently, "because you built it." Owen took a deep breath, finding courage in her steady gaze. "I built it for us, Olivia, if you'll have me. The smile that illuminated her face was answer enough, but she spoke the words he needed to hear. "Yes, Owen, I will." Their wedding took place in May, when the wildflowers carpeted the prairie and the promise of summer hung in the air. The entire town turned out for the celebration, along with homesteaders from miles around who had benefited from Olivia's care over the years. Mrs. Hanson and her children came from Bozeman for the occasion, the boys now healthy and growing fast, little Abigail shy but smiling. They brought a handmade quilt as a wedding gift, a tangible reminder of the bond forged in danger and sealed in trust. As Owen and Olivia spoke their vows before the community they had both come to cherish, he reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. From a solitary rider trusting nothing and no one to a man building a life with a woman who had shown him that trust, like a home, could be built one day at a time. Later that evening, as they danced under lantern light in the town square, Owen held his wife close and whispered, "Thank you." "For what?" Olivia asked, looking up at him with the same clear blue eyes that had assessed him so directly that first day in the general store. "For teaching me that trust isn't something you have or don't have," he replied. "It's something you build together day by day." She smiled, standing on tiptoe to kiss him gently. "We have a lifetime of days ahead of us, Owen Blackwood." And in that moment, surrounded by the community they served and the life they were creating together, Owen knew with absolute certainty that the lonely trail he had followed for so long had led him exactly where he was meant to be. 5 years later, Owen stood on the porch of their expanded home, watching as Olivia taught their 3-year-old daughter Sarah how to identify the wildflowers blooming in their garden. Their 1-year-old son James slept peacefully in a cradle nearby, his tiny face the perfect blend of his parents' features. Redemption Creek had grown as well, nearly doubling in size as the railroad had finally reached the area. Owen now served as the town's deputy marshal, while Olivia had established a proper medical clinic with the help of a young doctor from Boston who had answered her advertisement for an assistant. The Hanson children visited often, Mrs. Hanson having remarried and moved back to Redemption Creek 2 years earlier. Thomas, the oldest, had become Owen's shadow whenever he visited, eager to learn about horses and tracking from the man who had helped save his family. Life wasn't always easy in the Montana Territory. Winters were harsh, summers could bring drought, and the work of building a community never ended. But Owen faced each challenge with a strength he'd never possessed during his solitary years, the strength that came from being part of something larger than himself. As the sun set behind the mountains, casting long shadows across their land, Olivia joined him on the porch, little Sarah now occupied with a collection of pebbles and flowers. "Penny for your thoughts, Cowboy," she said, slipping her arm around his waist. Owen smiled, the expression now natural where once it had been rare. "Just thinking about how differently things might have turned out if I hadn't stopped in that general store 5 years ago." "Fate," Olivia suggested with a smile. "Choice," Owen countered. "I chose to offer help." "You chose to accept it. We chose to trust each other, even when it seemed foolish." She nodded, resting her head against his shoulder. "And we choose it again every day." Together they watched as the first stars appeared in the evening sky, their light a reminder of possibilities still unfolding in the life they had built from trust, courage, and love on the Montana frontier.